Good morning. It's Thursday, January 1st, 2015. Happy New Year. This is your morning edition on I-24 News. Coming up later today, after failing to pass a UN resolution, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas plans to sign on to the International Criminal Court, paving the way for a possible war crimes probe against Israel. A 2-year-old Idaho boy kills his mother in a tragic gun accident in the United States. And later on the show, what does 2015 hold for us in the cards? Good morning. I'm Yael Avi, and we begin with news right here in the Middle East. After suffering a diplomatic defeat at the UN Security Council Tuesday night, the Palestinian Authority is now seeking membership in over 20 international organizations, most worryingly for Israel, the International Criminal Court, paving the way for a possible war crimes probe against Israel. The move, which drew U.S. and Israeli condemnation, may enable the court to take jurisdiction over crimes committed in Palestinian-occupied lands and investigate the conduct of Israeli and Palestinian leaders over more than a decade of bloody conflict. The latest peace talks, mediated by the United States, collapsed back in April in a dispute over Israeli settlement construction and a prisoner release deal, as well as Abbas's decision to sign on to over a dozen previous international texts Israel saw as a unilateral move that circumvents the negotiations. And so, here we are today, with the Palestinians using what seems to be the last resort. We're joined in studio by we're joined in studio, actually, by Senior Foreign Ministry spokesperson Paul Hirson. Good morning to you, Paul.
Good morning. Good to be here.
Before we break this down, let's take a look at the following report that brings us to the point that we are at today.
Day went by, day 2 went by, day 3 went by, and poof, that was sort of the moment. So we find ourselves where we are.
And that was only the start of the downward spiral. Indeed, weeks passed and Israelis and Palestinians found themselves dealing with yet another violent conflict, and words like kidnapping, tunnels, airstrikes, and tensions dominated the Israeli-Palestinian dynamic as peace became a surreal idea.
The instigator of our teens' kidnapping was Hamas, the same Hamas Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas joined forces with.
As 3 Israeli teenagers were kidnapped and murdered by 2 young Palestinians, and in response a Palestinian teen was abducted and killed by Jewish extremists, the tensions between the 2 sides skyrocketed. Collision was inevitable, and it duly arrived.
Israel has chosen to make it a year of a new war of genocide perpetrated against the Palestinian people. We will not forget and we will not forgive, and we will not allow war criminals to escape punishment.
Not so long after a weak temporary ceasefire was achieved, the promised punishment came in the form of a violent blow-up throughout Israel, as terror attacks became an almost daily ritual. On the Israeli side, the harsh summer and the terror attacks which followed turned into a fierce political battle, which ended with the government collapsing and Israelis headed back to the polls in early 2015.
The finance minister Lapid, who failed in handling the economy, secretly aligned with the justice minister Livni in order to work against the government and against the prime minister. It's called a coup d'etat.
The impact of the events on the Palestinians resulted in a non-compromising international campaign for recognition of a Palestinian state, while the Gaza Strip remains in chaos.
It is high time to end this abhorrent Israeli occupation and impunity that has brought our people so much suffering.
As 2014 ends, there are not many hopes that 2015 will finally bring peace to the Middle East. Israelis and Palestinians confront an unstable uncertainty, each side on its own, and both of them together.
And poof, that was sort of the moment.
Joined in studio by Paul Hirson, the spokesperson for the Israeli Foreign Ministry. Paul, Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year.
Listen, this move to the UN was something that did not come as a surprise. I think there was a certain point there where everybody was, I think in Israel, worried that it might pass. But as it did not pass, the Palestinians seem to be pushing ahead, or Mahmoud Abbas at least is pushing ahead with what he threatened to do all along, and that is move ahead and try and basically in the International Criminal Court blame Israel or pave the way for a possible war crimes probe. This is what Mahmoud Abbas had to say yesterday when it comes to what the next step is for the Palestinians after the UN resolution failed at the Security Council. Let's have a listen.
They don't want to give us a right. The right is not given, the right is taken. We have to work on getting our right. The Security Council is not the end of the world, and this last session last night, you certainly stayed up for it, not the end of the path. We have what we have to say, and we have what we have to do, starting from tonight.
Paul, when it comes to the Palestinian decision to move ahead and go on to the International Criminal Court, is there any plan in place when it comes to the Foreign Ministry or the Israeli administration how to combat that?
Well, I don't know that there's so much a need to combat it, because the likely outcome, if the Palestinians ever actually go to the International Criminal Court, is that they're going to find themselves in the dock. And so it's really they who need to combat it, not us. Israel abides, and the Israeli military abides 100% within the dictates of international humanitarian law. We also have one of the world's most respected legal systems and judicial systems where we investigate ourselves, and if we ever find wrongdoing, take corrective action. So it's highly unlikely that we're going to see any action taken against Israel. I don't know that we can say with any degree of confidence the same thing about the Palestinians.
Yeah, but when it comes to the move itself, and you know, you and I have been sitting here many times in this studio, we all know that this projects very badly in Israel. And even if it doesn't move along in terms of a probe, a criminal probe against the state of Israel in the International Criminal Court, still, it's the move as a PR move that is clearly being supported internationally via many states in Europe, many countries in Europe. Is there any plan in place to try and, you know what, let me rephrase this, to change the, you know, the standing of Israel in the international public opinion at this stage?
Well, let me just say this to you. First of all, the vote in the United Nations illustrates to us the opposite, that the international community is not in line and is not comfortable at all with the direction that the Palestinians are taking, which is the further pursuit of conflict rather than the pursuit of conflict resolution. This is the issue. In game theory, they say that if there's no dilemma, there's no game. And the dilemma is this. Do the Palestinians want to have a state with peace, or do they want to have a state without peace? All of the indications right now is that all they're interested in is getting their state, which I can understand, but they're not interested in peace. That is not a formula that's ever going to happen.
I mean, it's something that I'm sure, you know, that is I don't want to say the company line when it comes to the Israeli administration. But let's go back to the UN resolution that failed. You know, it did fail, but it was very close to achieving the 9 votes. And it seemed like the United States did everything in its power to not get into the position of having to veto it. In fact, let's hear what Samantha...
Which illustrates just how far it was.
Well, how far it is, but still, you know, it does illustrate... Let's hear, you know, let's start by listening to what Samantha Power, the U.S. representative to the United Nations, had to say when it comes to the draft, to the text that was submitted to the UN yesterday. Let's have a listen.
We voted against this resolution not because we are comfortable with the status quo. We voted against it because we know what everyone here knows as well. Peace will come from hard choices and compromises that must be made at the negotiating table. Today's staged confrontation in the UN Security Council will not bring the parties closer to achieving a two-state solution. We voted against this resolution not because we are indifferent to the daily hardships or the security threats endured by Palestinians and Israelis, but because we know that those hardships will not cease and those threats will not subside until the parties reach a comprehensive settlement achieved through negotiations. And we remain committed to achieving...
Paul, I see you nodding in agreement, but that said, if one listens to Samantha Power, she very carefully caches her words, saying that they voted against, the United States voted against this resolution not because it's in favor of the status quo.
We endorse that 100%.
You endorse it 100%, but at the end of the day, I mean, one cannot completely take the blame away also from the Israeli side when it comes to where the negotiations have come, you know, have collapsed to at this stage. And at the end of the day, I think even the Palestinians, I mean, sadly, you know, it is New Year's Day, so we, you know, I'm sitting only with one side this morning, but that said, even the Palestinians figured that that move at the UN was not necessarily going to succeed. But it was a PR move. It was a move to show that it's the last resort, that there's nothing else to be done. It's trying to get the international community, and maybe even the UN, to be a partner when it comes to, or somebody to push the negotiations along.
Well, look, if it was just a PR move, then I would say that it's somewhat of a cynical abuse of the infrastructures of the international community to go and turn to the United Nations Security Council, the heart of the legitimacy of the international framework within which we all exist, and to abuse it to such a point just in order to score a cheap public relations point. It doesn't say very much about the veracity of the intentions of the Palestinians. But the question is, in which direction are we going? And you asked me about the United States ambassador's comment about the status quo. We're at the table. We're there, there's a deal ready to be made. Exactly as she said, both sides, and when I say both sides, that means us too, but it means also the Palestinians, are going to have to make very, very difficult compromises, compromises that perhaps neither of us are that interested in making, but they too are going to have to make those compromises. And this is exactly the problem that we're at, is that the Palestinians have understood, finally, that negotiations lead to compromises on both sides, and they are trying to achieve what they want without making the compromises. That's not going to happen. Now, it's also not going to happen that we're not going to make compromises. We too are going to have to make compromises, but both of us includes
But, you know,
them.
the argument to that would be, and, you know, as of late, we had the chance to sit with some UN representatives, I'm not going to name names, who told us, you know, behind the scenes that it feels that the UN, to UN representatives, that Israel is the one who does not want peace. That at the end of the day, also, when it comes to the Israeli side in the last round of negotiations, every time there was supposed to be a deal or prisoners were released, settlement construction showed lack of faith. So when you say that Israel is at the table, how is it at the table when moves as such? That's one. And secondly, I don't think it's a secret that the United States is doing everything in was doing everything in its power not to be in a position where it has to veto a resolution, which is something they didn't do. They didn't have to at the end of the day, but they didn't want to do it. They even made it very clear.
They didn't want to use the veto, and that's one of the reasons why the Israeli Foreign Ministry worked so hard in order to facilitate a situation that they didn't need to, and
so?
we delivered.
Is it true that the Israeli Foreign Ministry is pushing very hard? Nigeria per se?
Nigeria is a very good friend of Israel's. We've been working very closely with Nigeria for a long time now. Rwanda as well, who also abstained. Australia, who voted in favour. You know, there's a whole world out there, and we saw real support for Israel and against the Palestinian policy. That doesn't mean against the Palestinians, against the Palestinian policy of pursuing conflict, of internationalizing the conflict, of avoiding negotiations. You ask how so are we at the table?
Yeah.
Look, Israel introduced a moratorium some years back, a moratorium on settlement construction. We tried that, it didn't help. We released dozens and dozens of convicted mass murderers.
Yes, but a second after those prisoners were released in the last round of negotiations, 5 seconds later, more housing was basically, and that's most likely for the right-wing constituency within Netanyahu's government, within this administration, were immediately, you know, commissioned in the West Bank.
You know, it's easy to put it out there as if the West Bank is one huge piece of territory, which it isn't, and as if it's one piece of territory. The deal is this: when we renewed construction within the Jewish communities in the West Bank some years ago, after the Palestinians didn't respond, didn't come to the table with the moratorium on construction, Prime Minister Netanyahu said that the construction, the new construction, will have no impact on the peace map. What does that mean? No impact on the peace map means we're only authorizing construction within those settlements which it is understood by all parties will be incorporated into Israel under any agreement. In other words,
that wasn't necessarily the case in the last round.
That is absolutely the case.
I mean, by all parties that the Palestinian agreed that construction within that...
This is the problem, is that WikiLeaks, the leaking of conversations with American diplomats, which I think was an irresponsible and dangerous event, was also fascinating. And we learned a number of things from WikiLeaks. And one of the things we learned is that what we, Israel, say in private and in public is the same thing, which is why WikiLeaks was almost boring when it came to Israel. And another thing that we learned is that that is not something you can say about the Palestinians or almost anybody else in the neighborhood. The gap between what the Palestinians say in private and what the Palestinians say in public is sometimes dangerously wide. Absolutely. The only construction that we are authorizing is inside communities which it's been understood by everybody.
Even if it's with inside communities, that it is understood behind closed doors that those communities will stay within what will be greater Israel in the event that someday there will be a two-state solution that moves ahead. Still, the timing of doing it a second after there's a beat for a negotiated peace process, doesn't that show kind of a muscle flex of we're doing what we want?
Hey, this is the Middle East. There's never good timing. Look what's going on around us, okay? When do you want to do it? You want to do it the day before or the day after, the week before, the week after? The life cycle of a news item in Israel is about 12 nanoseconds. There's never a good timing. We're moving ahead. We're living our lives. We're pretty proud of what we've done.
It's a beautiful, and I'm not saying this again because we said many times, I don't want to call it a spin. It's a beautiful way of putting it, but at the end of the day, it's, one step forward, one step back, and that's what it looks like to the international arena. And also,
I don't know if that's the case. We have open and very close and intimate conversations with the entire international community, some of which support us more, some of which support us less. And I think that behind closed doors there is a very deep understanding that Israel is there. Israel is willing to make very, very difficult compromises, but we're not in the habit of committing suicide. We need to know that our security concerns are taken care of. Israel has accepted the idea of a Palestinian Arab state. It's part of the official policy of the government of the State of Israel. That's not the obstacle. The obstacle has always been the existence of the Jewish state.
And again, that is the administrative company line, and and many will agree with you. That said, it is no secret, and you being of the foreign ministry, that internationally, Israel's standing, and especially with these type of unilateral moves by the Palestinian side, the international standing of Israel is not really very good, and I'm putting it very mildly right now. I mean, it really isn't. Paul, one second. I just want to give you an example. Britain, when it comes to this UN resolution, chose to abstain. There are countries, European countries, that chose to abstain because they don't want to basically show where, they don't want to really pick a side at this stage in the game. The United States did everything in its power not to get to the point where it has to veto this UN resolution. And it's no secret that over the course of the last several months, it seems to be kind of a fad in Europe to basically recognize a Palestinian state unilaterally as well. So Israel is not standing well internationally.
Well, you keep on going back to Europe, and there are issues in Europe, but I think if you look at Israel's relations with China, Israel's relations with Black Africa, which were illustrated in a dramatic way at the United Nations vote, and Rwanda, and the two of them as representatives of Africa, not as lone states on their own. If you look at Israel's relations with India, if you look at the fact that Australia voted against, nobody would ever expect, we know Australia is a very good friend, but usually only America votes against this kind of a resolution. You mentioned, even within the heart of Europe, you mentioned Britain. Well, the truth of the matter is that Britain didn't abstain because they didn't want to take a side. Britain abstained because they weren't prepared to endorse the Palestinians in this particular issue. So this was a dramatic defeat.
They weren't prepared for that specific text. They didn't
Correct.
Which is a different way.
But we'll endorse a different text. Okay. I mean, you can say that you're going to change the text, therefore maybe it'll be endorsed. Of course, we are the only people in the Middle East who've put a proposal on the table again and again and again. The Palestinians are the people who've rejected those proposals every single time. They've never yet put a proposal on the table.
And when it comes to 2015, because we can do this dance for hours ahead, but when it comes to 2015, and clearly I think everybody will agree that the two sides at this stage are really at a point where something has to happen. It has to either move forward or blow up in a horrific way. I'm sorry to put it that way, but this is where it's standing. 2015, what's on the agenda when it comes to Israel standing both internationally and maybe, also the peace process? Well, I know Israel is at the table. I know Israel wants peace, but still, internationally, I think, putting aside China and Australia, Europe, a huge component of this world, not very much in favor of Israel, and the United States, doing everything in its power to basically try and not pick a side when it comes to public persona. So what's on the table for Israel?
I have a poor record of predicting the future, so it's a little bit difficult for me to answer that question. And one should
never do that, obviously, in the Middle East.
But yes. I will say that 2014 for everybody in the Middle East was a particularly tough year.
Putting it mildly. Yes.
We're optimistic. We think that we're on the right side of history. The various metrics that are there that we measure, be they political, be they diplomatic, be they economic or social, are relatively positive. We got challenges ahead of us, but that's what keeps us on our toes. We're optimistic, and we're there. There's a deal waiting to be done with the Palestinians and with the Arab world at large.
Well, I think the next move will be most likely to see what the new administration / government in Israel will be, and then, and then there'll be a move along. But as you said, putting it mildly, 2014, not a good year for the peace negotiations or anything else in the Middle East. Paul Hurston, thank you so much for being with me at the Foreign Ministry. Happy New Year. Moving along, still news in the Middle East, specifically here in Israel. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu passed the first hurdle on his way to re-elections, handily winning the Likud leadership race, overcoming his chief rival, right-wing minister Dani Danon. Around half of the Likud party's 96,000 members cast their ballots yesterday in the party's primary elections. The results set forth the ranking of the ruling party slate ahead of the March 17th general vote. Though the number, once law, was pretty obvious, there was never more than a sliver of a chance that the Likud would turn on Netanyahu. But the rest of the list will reveal who wields the power in the party. The votes are currently being tallied by hand, and the official results will only be published later today. And so we are joined from Jerusalem by the Jerusalem Post political correspondent Gil Hoffman.
Pleasure being with you.
Gil, good morning to you. Great having you with us. And as we start, let's take a look first of all at yesterday. There was no secret, there was no surprise that Netanyahu was going to sweep this primary vote, was there?
No, not at all. I even put on the cover of the paper that Netanyahu was expected to win easily, which is a risk when you have an election where anything theoretically could happen.
Where anything dramatic could happen. And when it comes to Dani Danon and when it comes to the people within the Likud, his holding stands firm. That said, there are predictions, and I think even your prediction is that the top list when it comes to the Likud members being elected is actually going to break more to the right. Are we looking at something like that?
Look, not much choice. Tzach Negbi is the only member of Knesset in Likud who probably says he's in favor of a Palestinian state. And I don't know if he's going to get reelected to the Knesset. That leaves a list that behind Netanyahu will be opposed to concessions to the Palestinians.
But when it comes to the Likud list, okay, and when it comes to members that were, I'll take, for example, Feiglin, who we had the pleasure of interviewing in the studio several weeks ago. People like Feiglin, whose agenda was, Temple Mount, who actually, almost said that, the Jordanians aren't in charge of anything there. How is he looking, and how is that agenda looking within the Likud primaries?
I think it's too soon to say. Right now, he's off the list. Right now, he's not in. And on the one hand, there were a lot of people working against him, including Netanyahu himself, to try to prevent him from being in the next Knesset. But on the other hand, the votes in Jerusalem are not counted. And I was at the Jerusalem polling place yesterday when Feiglin arrived, and it certainly looked like he had a lot of support over there from the people that he brought into the party, at least, which is thousands of people.
Right. And when it comes to these primaries within the Likud and the list that will eventually end up being the list, how does that list specifically affect, do you believe, the Israeli public when it comes to the general elections? Does it have an effect on it?
There's no doubt that people are going to be looking at who the candidates are, not only at the top of the list, but also on the cusp. If Likud is polling somewhere between 20 and 25 seats, people are going to be looking at who is on the list between 20 and 25 and comparing it to whatever other party they're considering voting for and who are on the cusp over there. And so when the vote come in, right now still too soon to say, I'm going to be looking at who the candidates are over there.
Right. But and you just mentioned the numbers. If Likud is polling 24, at this stage in the game, over the course of the last week, we've been seeing similar numbers with Labor polling the same thing, 24 to 24. How does that affect, though, then the general election if people are looking at the list of the Likud that is, might be slightly harsher, might be slightly more to the right?
There's no doubt that the list being too right-wing can hurt the Likud, absolutely. Then again, the Likud is also competing for votes among right-wing voters, and if the list isn't right-wing enough, for whatever reason, he can lose votes to Bayit Yehudi, which is putting together an attractive list and has its own primary coming up. So anything can happen in this election. In the end, the decision is going to be made by the president.
I want to ask you exactly about these elections. As you said, anything can happen in these elections. Is that really true? Because many people who are calling this the Bibi election, if you speak to Israelis, are seeing this actually as a fait accompli, that Benjamin Netanyahu is going to win again, that everything is always going to happen the same way. Do you, in your experienced expertise, in your experienced opinion, do you think that these elections are really up for grabs for anyone?
Absolutely. It's 50-50. Whether Netanyahu will form the next government or not. And the reason is not because of what happens on March 17th, because of what happens in the couple of weeks after that. The different party heads are going to be coming to the president and making their recommendations about who should form the next government. President Reuven Rivlin has fought with Netanyahu for 20 years, including with Netanyahu's wife. They don't have good relations. And it could very well be that the only party heads who say that Netanyahu should form the government are Netanyahu and Naftali Bennett, who personally has a lot of problems with Netanyahu.
But when
all the other party heads, the other 10 parties representing 80 members of Knesset, can all say that they want somebody else to form a government. And then even if the right gets 70 votes and the left gets 50 votes, we will have a left-wing government, unless you have the most likely scenario, I think, which is a national unity government of Likud and Labor together.
Really? Fascinating. Well, you said it here first, but I want to ask you then, if it's not your prediction, it's a Likud and Labor together, which would be fascinating to see, who do you think will be the kingmaker this time? Because clearly it's not going to be Yesh Atid. I mean, I think we both can agree that, Yesh Atid is not going to sweep the same way it did last time, and Lieberman's not looking very good in the polls when it comes to all these corruption claims and against his party. So the new kingmaker, because there will most likely be somebody.
Moshe Kaplan will be the kingmaker, I think, because he can join any kind of coalition. Victor Lieberman, right in the last Jerusalem Post poll, was barely passing the threshold, but he, in a speech this week, said that a national unity government should be formed, a government as wide as possible. And I think that's what the world is missing in its coverage of this race. I'm hearing too many reports from the foreign press talking about how Netanyahu got rid of left-wing ministers and he's going to form a right-wing government. They're clearly not listening to him. What he says is he fired Levy and Lapid because they were annoying, because they were disloyal. Not because they were left-wing. And he says over and over again, I'm going to form a wide government. Now, you can't have a wide government of only right-wing parties. A wide government is a government that no party in the coalition can bring down at any time. That means you're talking about 80 members of Knesset. And that means that you're going to have left and right together. Netanyahu has been hinting that he wants a left-wing party in the government like he's always had. Well, it's not going to be Yesh Atid because the ultra-Orthodox are going to be part of any coalition, no matter who forms it. That leaves only Labor. And that means that this election is going to be a decision of whether Isaac Herzog is going to be our foreign minister or our prime minister.
Gil Hoffman, fascinating, and I'm going to call you on it, so to speak, I think on March 18th to see if this prediction, or a little bit after March 17th, if this prediction comes through. And thank you so much for being with us this morning. Coming up next, an American mother was killed when her 2-year-old son pulled a loaded pistol from her purse and shot her. We'll take a closer look at gun control in the United States. First, though, let's hear some more of the headlines. Good morning, I-24 News Morning Edition. I cannot get this wrong today because it is
January 1st? Wow. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Exactly.
Wow.
I know. We're doing press first, but we do have Mark Zell in studio, and we will explain later on why.
That's always good for fireworks, isn't it?
Completely. Mark, I see you and my heart explodes. But Tony, do not be offended.
Fireworks.
I know, fireworks. Tony, you are still my first and one and only. And that said, here on this New Year morning day to say news that we missed while scanning the headlines.
Well, first, I mean, because it is New Year's, start with just a little bit of happy news. Of course, Australia, New Zealand would have always first tracked in the media because they're doing their fireworks first. So, that was on a very happy note. We had, beautiful fireworks display in Sydney. Particularly beautiful with the colors over the harbour and the Opera House.
Gorgeous stuff.
So gorgeous.
I'm wondering if we have it.
I know.
No terrorists.
No terrorists.
No, nothing bad. Not even Olivia Newton-John, doing her hits for the.
That some may argue may be a terrorist. But I never said that. Yes.
So it was looking very good there in that part of the world, in that hemisphere. But
now we're seeing a little picture of that's beautiful. Look at that. They give a good fireworks.
Oh right, amazing stuff there.
Yes.
And of course, because the world is a big place and a lot of news happening, we had some unfortunate turn of events in China. So moving very quickly to Shanghai, where in the Bund section, which is a very historic part of Shanghai, there was actually a stampede in the context of New Year celebrations. Apparently, about 35 people were killed. I think we have some footage of this.
We might. I do believe that there's some footage from the scene there. Yeah, it's my lord.
Yeah.
And what was going on there? I think it was they were basically running for some. Oh my God, running for some money that was coming out that was being thrown at the audiences. But that's
whatever the underlying issue is, just the crowd control, which is always a concern at New Year's celebrations, whether it's in New York City or wherever. You're always this close away to a situation.
A situation, definitely.
Unfortunately, here has some tragic consequences.
Oh my God, yeah.
Anyway, so hopefully better January 2nd in store for the Chinese there.
Moving along.
Moving along to the situation with Russia and the rest of the world. I have a story from the last.
That's a great way of putting it. The situation with Russia and the rest of the world.
Yes. And this is what we're going to be seeing. Actually, wait, before that, I want to talk about Daily Star Beirut, talking about that Syrian Kurds are controlling 70% of besieged Kobani, which is a nice, interesting headline to see.
That is good news. I mean, looking at the fact that for the last, I think it's 4 months, we've been seeing a terrible battle rage in Kobani.
Yes, and the battle's still underway, but let's say there were more airstrikes led by the U.S. coalition overnight Tuesday, so the tide might be turning as we get into 2015.
No, very true.
So
that said, I have to
hopefully.
Say that, we had Paul Aslier, who's the bureau chief of Russia today, yesterday in studio, kind of looking at the end of the year and ISIS over this year. Kobani is something that all of us in the foreign press, all of us in the media actually focused on. We cannot forget there's so many cities like that in Syria and Iraq where the battle against ISIS is raging. Exactly.
It's just one prominent.
As I said, 2015 is going to be actually, I think, the showdown when it comes to ISIS. But yes, on that happy note.
As we head into spring. And also as we head further into 2015, Russia, we'll get to that story with the LA Times, says Russia's threatening to halt cooperation with the United States on Iran and Syria in response to this continuing stream of U.S. sanctions. So the Putin knows how to play hardball. We know this. And Obama administration, some people say, is playing softball, and we're going to see what happens as the game heats up, because the consequences could be severe.
No, I'm looking at Mark Zellier in the studio.
I've been in Moscow about 4 times in the last month, and I can tell you that the public opinion for Putin is very high.
Yes.
And,
yes.
No, and that's the interesting.
I think we need to approach the Russian problem with a little bit more sophistication than we've done.
It's more than a reset.
More than a reset. Putin, clearly not going away, and it's fascinating to see the strength of this man within Russia.
Yeah, especially if Russia is saying that they're going to warm up more to Iran in the context of nuclear talks.
Yes.
The White House needs to to
take note.
Yes, and perhaps look at that.
That's a PC way of putting it.
Very PC.
Very PC.
Also back in Washington, let's say the Washington Post talks about how the Pentagon, which is moving closer to closing Guantanamo, Gitmo, the military prison there, sending 5 prisoners to Kazakhstan. Don't know what they're going to do there, but
that sounds worse than Gitmo.
Yeah, in a way.
So.
But it's interesting because people tend to forget the fact that Guantanamo is in Cuba, and there's a rapprochement, big time, between the United States and Cuba. So who knows what's going on, behind the scenes? This is interesting stuff to follow as we get to 2015.
And the closing of Gitmo, but then possibly creating something similar in a different place is also questionable.
Well, he's going to have a fight with the Congress too on
one of many issues they will be slugging it out over, I'm sure.
Oh, Mark,
yes.
I'm so glad you're sitting with us. Good times,
well,
yes.
Anyway, on a lighter note, a travel note, because it's still the holiday travel season.
Sure.
And here's a story in the Daily Mail, which is close to my heart because it's a very similar thing happened to me the other day. Reported that a Delta Airlines flight from New York's JFK to Tel Aviv recently was delayed after an ultra-Orthodox Jewish passenger is refusing to sit next to a woman.
Yeah, I know that.
Now, we know that this situation has dogged El Al flights. There was one in September, which there were a lot of delays, and apparently was a difficult flight over. And this issue does not seem to be going away. And it raises all sorts of issues, I think, which also, bleed into the political spectrum. The influence of the ultra-right Orthodox parties and the religious undertones, which, in a situation like this, there's clear-cut discrimination things going on.
You think?
Listen.
As a woman, I have to say, I think we're living at the 21st century. And of course, this is my personal opinion as a woman. But that said, it's something that I think, is, especially as you said, with the upcoming elections and discrimination issues, looking at the fact that we are living in modern times.
And this kind of thing, yes, and tourism is impacted here. People think they're going to have a problem on a flight to Israel because they can't sit next to people that have, social issues. People are maybe thinking about going to Egypt instead. Anyway, speaking of taking off, the Spanish economy. Yes.
Really?
No. That's I mean, come on, Spain. But the Spanish Prime Minister, Mariano Rajoy, says that 2015 will be the year that the economy definitively takes off. You know, I think, you know, if they hadn't, you know, tossed out the Jews years ago, they'd be doing better right now. But he says that things are looking rosier for Spain.
I think the people of Spain need to hear something like that when it comes to, I think, you know, after the crash of 2008, when it comes to Europe, Spain, I think, is the country who really one of the countries that was really hit hard.
The bubble burst there in a big way.
In a big way, one of the places where, you know, Occupy Madrid, or what it was called in Spain. Again, it's the first part of the civil so-called uprise to try and change the economic situation. So they need it, but it'll be interesting to see.
The indicators seem like there could be a slow recovery, and I contrast that to Greece, where the signs were looking good, but now snap elections happening, dicey things. You know, what does this mean for the Eurozone? So it's going to be interesting as well.
To see how many countries Germany can bail out.
Yes, and they're getting tired of that too.
And one last one.
Wall Street Journal, a cute little headline. Bill de Blasio's eventful rookie year, talking about the mayor of New York, who's been having a rough time. And again, he is not maybe the Wall Street Journal's favorite guy to be leading New York. He's a liberal, the whole issue with the NYPD and that controversy. So let's see what happens with the relations between the police department in New York and the mayor's office. Very fractured right now.
But as a former New Yorker, I got to tell you, I love the fact that New York's beginning to feel a little bit, I don't love the fact, but it's beginning to feel a little bit like the 70s in New York.
You know, it's
in many ways.
It's dangerous and interesting at the same time.
Mayor Dinkins coming back? Is that?
Wow.
I don't think
I remember him elected. Yes, that's how old I am.
And Al Sharpton in the White House.
Wow.
Good times.
Good times. Tony, fabulous. You are staying with us for the next segment as we move on.
Thank you.
On to our next topic. Another case of a tragic shooting in the United States. 29-year-old Veronica Rutledge, an Idaho nuclear research scientist, died in a Walmart store after her 2-year-old son, I stress, 2-year-old son, pulled a loaded gun from her purse and shot her. One would think that the shocking incident would re-raise the question of firearms ownership this holiday season, but stores that sell guns reported brisk sales this Christmas in the United States, with gift vouchers for gun proving popular. Now, according to Gallup, 42% of Americans now have a gun in their home, with people today buying more guns, or actually more than twice as many guns as they did in 1998. Gun control is one of the most divisive topics in U.S. society, the debate pivoting on the interpretation of the Second Amendment. And today, this is why we are joined in studio by the co-chair of the Republicans abroad in Israel, Mr. Mark Zell. Mark, it's always good to have you.
Yael, we're ready?
All righty, we are ready. Let's take it head-to-head because I feel very strongly about this issue.
I know you do.
I know. Before we break it down, let's take a look at the following report that recaps the events in Idaho.
Flashing lights guard the entrance of the Hayden Walmart after the unthinkable happened on a post-Christmas shopping trip.
It appears that the victim brought several of her children here to the store to do some shopping after the holidays.
Cooney County Sheriff Deputy Stu Miller says the woman and several kids were in the electronics section. Security cameras confirmed what witnesses saw.
The child was, looks like, to be sitting in the shopping cart with the purse while the female victim was shopping.
What happened next? Unimaginable.
Around the age of 2, accessed a concealed weapon that was inside the victim's purse and discharged it, striking the victim.
The child's mother died in the store. Walmart has been closed for the day, and grief counselors will be on hand for employees. The store evacuated as a precaution.
This is a pretty tragic incident right now that we're dealing with.
The woman and her family were visiting the area for the holidays. Investigators were on scene all afternoon, processing the scene of such a tragic morning.
Especially, here it is, around the holidays, just after Christmas, right before the New Year, tragic accident.
Joined in studio, as we said, by Mark Zell, chairman for Republicans abroad in Israel. Mark, between the Sandy Hook shooting, mass shooting at the school in Connecticut, which claimed the lives of 20 children and 6 adults in December of 2012, and now the end of 2014, when we're looking at a 2-year-old kid using a gun of his mother that she got for Christmas, it was a Christmas present, that gun, and killing his mother accidentally. What do you think is more important, the right to bear arms or the crucial need, and I'm saying this is my opinion, the crucial need in the United States for gun control?
Well, yeah, we've had this discussion before, and I'm
sad to say that I think we're going to have it many more times.
And I think we are. And first, I have to say that this is a tragic, a horrific event. When it happens, you know, we can only think of the horror that the family experienced. But you know, it comes back to basic values in American society. Yael, this right to bear arms is protected by nothing less than the Second Amendment to the United States Constitution. That comes right after the First Amendment that protects free speech and free press and all that. I mean, this is considered, and the Supreme Court of the United States has said it now not once but twice in the last 6 years.
But when the bar is raised so high on what shocks Americans, when something like that happens, or Connecticut, 20 kids, 6 adults.
Those are horrible events and horrible things, but they happen.
Mark.
And so it happens when tens of thousands of people are slaughtered on highways, and people are killed by drunk drivers. I mean, guns are dangerous, cars are dangerous, but in American society, and the polls show this, Yael,
guns can be controlled.
60-some% of Americans today support the right to bear arms. And it's not something that the rest of the world understands very
That's what
easily.
I'm asking you to explain to us.
I'm explaining to you that this is
in a region that is torn by terror, that violence is constantly, you know, at our heads, and you're looking at the United States and
well,
you're wondering.
look at Israel. I mean, Israel, we don't protect the right to bear arms by a constitutional amendment. We don't even have a constitution, for God's sakes. But in Israel, arms, and I'm talking about serious, you know, assault weapons, are held in many homes around the country because of the army. Now, people are trained to use those arms.
Yeah, but they're also taught, there's a
to...
difference. In the army, in the Israeli army, kids at 18 are taught the sanctity of the weapon. That's something that Americans do not go through.
Well, you know, I'll tell you something. It depends on the state. But you're right. Americans don't have the kind of training for the use of weapons that we see here. On the other hand, in the United States, in American society, this right to protect yourself, you know, in the Supreme Court case of McDonald versus Chicago, okay, I'm not going to give you a legal argument, but the facts in that case, this was a family that was living in a drug-ridden, gang-controlled area of Chicago, and he was, and the plaintiff in that case wasn't allowed to buy a handgun, and the NRA and the other organizations, Second Amendment organizations, went to the court to protect his right to protect himself against, and the court said that's what the Second Amendment's about.
Yeah, but at the end of but we're looking at guns available because they're in homes to kids, to either mentally ill people, to kids that are...
they're not available to mentally ill people.
You can walk into a bodega anywhere else in the United States and buy a gun.
It's not true. First of all, each state has its own set of regulations, okay? And they have to comply with the Second Amendment. And now, by the way, I just was with Governor Pence from Indiana, and one of the things, he came to Israel this week, and one of the things he said is that one of the beauties of the American federal system is that we have 50 states, or like 50 different laboratories. We can test out whether gun control legislation really works. And the fact is, it doesn't. It doesn't really work.
How has it been tested out? Gun control, you know, put in place in stricter form has not really been used, because I think every governor, every chief in any state, and also in the United States, every American president knows that if they're going to try and impose stricter gun control, you know, they're going to lose their position.
That's not true. That's simply not true. In a state like New York, it's not true. In California, it's not true. Now, if they tried to do a gun control in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, it's not going to work there.
Sadly, the time we have, because you and I are going to have this discussion over and over again, but I'm glad that you're here to try and defend this. We are going to agree to disagree. I love having you in studio. All the time we have, sadly, when we get back, astrology. Can you believe it? First, though, the news. Good morning. Yes, it is January 1st, 2015. It is the morning show on I-24 News. It's the place where you should spend every single day, every single morning of 2015. You just must. And it still is, well, it's still me, Yael V, last I checked, of course.
I'm still Anthony Grant.
You're still Anthony Grant. You're the one and only Anthony Grant. Yeah. Let's lead into this. I'm very excited. Now, the year that just ended, 2014, saw wars, terrorism, diseases, disasters become far too common. It left us all hoping for a better future. Now, for centuries, people have been looking to the stars for answers about what lies ahead. So given the unpredictability of 2014, why not start there? in the stars when looking ahead to the new year. Yes, this is hardcore news right here. For this reason, we are joined in studio.
It is.
Yeah, hardcore. But we are joined
the best part.
The best part.
The best part.
This is the news you cannot miss. Joined in studio by astrological counselor Margot Saffer, okay. Good morning to you. And by astrologer and Kabbalah teacher at the Kabbalah Center International, Yael Yerdeni. Yael, good morning to you. Good morning. And as we said, well, first of all, Yael Yerdeni, I mean, I'm looking at the stars, I'm looking at astrology. I didn't even know, and I'm the first one to admit, I don't know what Kabbalah astrology means. I did do a quick search online yesterday, and I'm going to say this on the air. All I found is that there are ominous predictions that Uranus is going to rule terrorism for many, many years to come in the Kabbalah astrology. Am I right in saying that?
It's not only in the Kabbalah astrology, it's all in all the astrology.
Yeah, maybe you don't even have to be an astrologer, to say that, right? Yeah, in many ways. What is Kabbalah astrology?
Well, Kabbalistic astrology has a different calendar than the regular Gregorian calendar because it's a mixed calendar. You know, there is the Islamic calendar, which is based solely on the calculation of the moon. Therefore, for instance, like a holiday like Ramadan can be in any seasons. Then there is the Gregorian calendar, which is very, very fixed and very solid. It's always, the same. And basically, the Kabbalistic or Jewish calendar is exactly in the middle because the months are lunar. So it's not 31 days, it's less. But the year is solar, meaning we are respecting the seasons. Okay. So therefore, we'll see, for instance, that the Jewish New Year can fall in the beginning of September, in the middle of September, in the end of September. So there is a little bit of time, difference, but it's still always during the fall. Okay, and Passover will always be, for instance, during the spring.
And I love that it's in the middle. Like, it's so Jewish. We're always stuck in the middle in many ways.
Good question.
We're stuck, kind of stuffed in there. But well, first of all, we've asked both of you to do some charts. Frightening thought. But before we go into the personal things that really interest us, such as if I'm going to survive 2015, I'm wondering about when it comes to Kabbalah astrology. And actually, let's start with you. You live Margot. I'm hungover. Slightly tipped. It is the first day of the year. Margot, you are an astrologer. You live right behind us. Right. You live in one of these fabulous boats in the Jaffa Port, which is great. Yeah, because that's your house right there. Right. And which goes so well with being an astrologer. Looking at the coming year, I think if one lives in Israel and the Middle East, maybe the thing that everybody's looking at is the Israeli elections. Right. You actually did a chart for the Israeli elections. I did. Yes. We told you it's coming. Here's what's going to happen.
Yeah, first to say, I didn't realize I would have my own actual lighthouse when I thought that my therapy sessions are called Lighthouse. So the election chart is something that I'm not sure what you saw, but it's something. The date that they have chosen for this particular election, March 17th, 2015, is. You kind of have to think either somebody did this on purpose or you can't think what somebody was thinking in order to choose this particular day.
Before you continue, because the only thing that comes into my mind, crazy people, it's St. Patrick's Day. I know, it's St. Patrick's Day. We need to get back. Yeah, said the Irish girl. But why March 17th is so weird?
So what you mentioned earlier with Uranus, there's a configuration of planets. There's going to be a configuration. It's been going on since 2012, but in certain moments exactly. And on March 17th, it's going to between Uranus and Pluto, there's going to be a 90-degree angle. That's what we look at is cycles and geometric angles.
And that's not good.
And anything that's at a tension angle, which is 90 degrees, 180 degrees, is not good. No. And it bodes
what
with
were they thinking?
Literally what were they thinking?
Okay.
And you kind of have to wonder, was somebody thinking something, or is this just
the Illuminati?
Flora, you didn't say that, Tony Grimes.
I definitely would not have said that.
So what does that mean?
So what these planets represent are like a transformation in power structures and an individuation. So there's kind of a sense of a seeking an individual freedom.
Right.
So now if you put those ideas towards the upcoming elections, you can start to wonder that there'll be a surprise.
You mean on the election or before that could impact the election?
All sorts of things.
When you say surprise,
because these planets move particularly slowly, the effects are wider reaching.
Margot, let's hit the nail on the head. Let's hit the nail on the head. Is Bibi going to win? What does the chart say?
I don't see anything that's going to be centrist of any kind. I imagine it going towards an extreme or the other. Or, I mean, the fact that there's going to be a surprise is that the surprise might be that there's no surprise.
That there's no surprise. Okay.
But to expect the unexpected.
To expect the unexpected is...
I mean, the main thing that I always like to look at also is the fact that it's not that we don't have any control over it. That we as individuals living here...
We can change the charts?
We can change the charts.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, then before we continue with that, Yael, you tell me, elections, politics in Kabbalah.
Politics, well, actually, what was interesting for me when we look at the chart of Israel, okay, the chart of Israel is Taurus with a Libra rising. I mean, people love food in this country. I don't know if you noticed, but every 10 meters, you have a cafe shop.
Yeah.
And it's Taurus.
Wait, Israel as a whole is a Taurus?
Is a Taurus, 5th of Iyar.
Well, I'm a Taurus.
I know you're a Taurus. I have
Taurus,
a lot to tell you, actually.
Oh,
wait.
I'm a nervous Taurus. I'm a very nervous Taurus.
Don't worry.
Yeah.
It's Taurus with a rising Libra. Okay, it's Libra rising, and the moon is in Leo. And it's very interesting because Jupiter entered Leo, and Jupiter is for us the planet of miracles. This is the way we call it in Kabbalah, or the planet of growth. And as Jupiter entered Leo, all these things were going on, like we had the missiles falling all over, in Israel, etc. And every time it missed, that's Jupiter. Jupiter is like your kind of Captain America type of planet that goes like, okay, no, and it kind of is. There were like, I don't know, like 5,000 missiles or something. It should have looked like Bosnia by now. And somehow, Jupiter aligned with the moon, kind of, really protected.
Working
it's a
with
protection.
Iron Dome.
With the Iron Dome, but we can miss still. I mean, it's still, human errors still happen.
Way to go, Jupiter.
So we are under the umbrella of Jupiter in Leo until basically August. Yes, and the
Iron Dome is also an umbrella. But, moving on, because the only thing that comes to mind right now to me, I want to sit here and break out and when the moon is in the seventh. Never mind. That said, let's go to the really, really interesting bit. Let's do my chart, because both of you have been actually, instructed. You were gracious enough to do the chart for the weird date that I was born in, and I will confess, and that is 29th of February. That comes every 4 years. I'm 10 years old. That could put put so many men in jail. But that said,
this is sliding.
Yeah, I know. Welcome to my morning show. That said, yes, no, actually, Margot, let's start with you. Yes, go for that. 29th of February, yes, 1972. Am I going to survive 2015?
Magically, yes.
Yes. Okay.
Score.
Yeah.
Good times.
And what was interesting is I actually looked at both of your charts and looked at saw many actually similarities between your charts. Main thing that I actually
I'm scared.
You can see that you're somebody who's in the public eye, that that communication is your tool,
right.
and more than that, it's emotionally satisfying for you. That if you get joy, it fills you up.
Or in other ways, I'm loud. Yes.
But also extremely intuitive, which really helps in this
Cat-like,
sort of, it's...
And
so
Tony?
You too.
Am I cat-like and feline?
Okay. I'm loving this.
Oh.
So one major thing that I do see in this year is that I'm not sure your
Be honest.
being is a sort of that you would benefit from sort of spiritual practice, or that you do, and if not, that it could bring up this year could bring up those kind of questions for you, and that would that you have a very active imagination, and that it would also help you to kind of find a way in order to channel it.
2015.
2015.
Okay, Yael.
Well, first of all, the thing that struck me, you very much together, right? I mean, we're talking about the professionally speaking, you know, like, and it's very interesting. I found you very complimentary because you have no water. You are Pisces.
I'm Pisces,
and you have very little
rising.
Earth, and he's a Taurus.
I'm all Earth.
So we found like some place to complement each other. That was the first thing. I'm like,
yes.
That's why you're my work husband.
You know, it's
it's just
You're the
and no,
it's
it's very like there's a lot of like interesting things between the two of you because your rising sign I found to be 26 degrees in Pisces. Your Mercury is 20 degrees in Pisces. So like. You kind of roll, you know, the ball rolls between the two of you in a very easy way. And you are born. It's connected. And then you were born on Purim. You were born on the holiday of Purim. It's the full moon.
A crap thing if you're a kid. Yeah, it's a full moon. Yeah.
It's the full moon. Yeah. You know, the full moon has a lot of power. You know, in the Kabbalah, you're born in the full moon. It's like an irradiation of energy. This is the reason why, like the legend of the werewolf, right?
Yes.
Because there is so much energy.
I have a confession to make. yes.
You turn down then.
Exactly.
But on the full moon, you have to know that, you know, scientifically it's proven that, for instance, there's more burglaries, people that work in institutions, you know, like in mental institution where there is instability.
I have another
you have to have a lot more staff on those nights.
Right.
No, it's true because it's so strong.
Yeah. I'm the psychopathic thief. Yeah.
Psychopath and thief. No, but it's a very important year because you have a lot of mutable signs. And Saturn entered a mutable sign.
Right.
Like in the end of December, I'll explain that simple, like in layman terms.
Please.
In the end of December, Saturn moved after 2 years in Scorpio. Now, Saturn is the IRS of the zodiac. No one likes the IRS, okay? Some call it the malefic, the karmic, you know, the teacher.
It's bad.
It's heavy. It's very heavy. So, like for 2 years, all the fixed signs, which are the Taurus and the Taurus and the Scorpios and the Leo and the Aquarius, you know, Saturn were making angles to them, and it's sitting on them like an elephant. So now, what's happening is that it moved to a mutable sign, and your chart has a lot of mutable signs. So we expect for you for the year, like a lot of changes, like a lot of different ways of looking at things. You know, Saturn, in the end of the day, it's heavy, it's difficult, but it helps a person come to realization, as you said.
Right.
You know, like all kind of realizations.
A nice way of looking at Saturn, I like to think, is it's the banks of a river, that if it weren't for the banks, the water would just disperse. So it allows for, it's not as though it's forcing the direction.
You're telling me I'm going to have a really rough year, but it's going to turn.
I didn't say that. I said it's going to be a very interesting year that will filter a lot of, you know, like sometimes we don't have the right environment. This is the right environment, but sometimes we have, you know, sometimes you have people that come in your life and are not exactly the right for you. I can tell you one thing, like Saturn is going to filter them like big times. So it's going to leave place for brand new blood.
Oh, great.
Brand new blood in your life. I think it's a good one.
No. Wow. Yeah, completely. And Tony? Real quick.
And Tony, really quickly. Well, Tony is going on a permanent vacation after Saturn is completely out of your way. It was opposed to your Saturn. A good vacation.
עכשיו?
עכשיו,
Now you're going to Greece.
Forever.
Okay.
And a very, very strong, like, learning and, you know, path for you. So either you're going to want to specialize in something or go back to learn something, and it's going to,
it's going to, general stuff for
elevates.
2015, so sadly, you know, I mean, that's the time we have, but general stuff for 2015?
General stuff.
Actually, Marguerite, do you have general stuff for 2015?
Sure. What I want to also say is the idea of predictions is also a little bit, I don't really like the idea of predictions.
No.
So the point saying is here we are on the first day of the year, and so let's, I think, turn the idea of prediction into idea of intentions or hopes.
Yeah.
And so this is something that we don't, so when you say a prediction.
We can talk about addiction.
Addictions I can talk about.
When you talk about a prediction, it leaves us feeling helpless.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like going to an election and we, you know, so we think, oh, why even vote? But we don't even have any power. Or we vote and then we sit back and we then complain.
Yeah.
So it's the same kind of thing. It's like you're predicting for the weather. It's going to storm this weekend. Okay, so you either take a raincoat, you stay home, you go to
In
Greece.
other words, people do something.
You dance in the rain.
So,
exactly.
okay.
This is really what it's the main thing is to acknowledge that we have control.
We do.
And that's why astrology is so beautiful, is it helps you to navigate the map that we've been given.
Yeah. For the new year, I mean, windows of opportunity, I think the big highlight, it's the eclipse.
Really, the eclipse. And sadly, the eclipse in 20 seconds, we can't really predict what the eclipse will be. But that said, do stay with us when we get back. Some sports and web stuff. So stay with us. First, the news. Good morning, and thank you for staying with us. I-24 News Morning Edition. It is January 1st, 2015. That hopefully will be much better than 2014, the year that sucked. But come on,
that's being blunt about it.
Then we just had this whole discussion with everybody that was in the studio today, how 2014 was not the year to be remembered when it comes to political issues, when it comes to
environmental issues,
disasters, right?
Wars, anything.
I know. Shai, what do you think about that?
I like 2014. I'm sorry. I'm here to tell you, otherwise, it was a great year.
It was a great year.
For me, which is what's
very important.
Yeah.
That is very important.
It's very important. Very important. That would be Shai Ringel of The Tube, sitting here with Mirav Savir of the Sports Magazine. As I always say, you know, beauty and brains. We're going to go for brains first, Mirav. So,
thank you.
But basically, Mirav, Sports Magazine, you have a story that sounds amazing, and I'm going to let you lead into it.
Absolutely. I spent the morning at the Daniel Rowing Center in Tel Aviv, and I got to meet with two different groups of people, two guys that are trying to get to the Olympics in Rio in 2016, so we're already looking ahead to the next year.
Yes.
And one very special woman, her name is Moran Samuel. She is in a wheelchair. She was injured. She had moved into a wheelchair when she was 2006, I believe, 8 years ago. She only started rowing in 2010. So within 4 years, she already made it to the London Paralympics in 2012. And this past summer, she won the silver at the World Championship. So we're going to take a look. I sat down with her.
Love it. Optimistic story. Let's take a look.
I've been an athlete all my life. I started playing basketball when I was 9 years old and played professionally, played a national team, youth team. And when I was 24, I discovered the wheelchair. After rehabilitation and a few years that I haven't been doing any kind of sport, I started playing wheelchair basketball again. The problem was that the Paralympic Committee didn't see me fulfilling my, full potential as a basketball player, as a Paralympic athlete. So they decided to send me here to the Rowing Daniel Center and said, you know what, if you want to get, to the top level, to the Paralympic Games, to the biggest event in sport, you need to row. It took a few months to really start to enjoy it and understand how I need to use my body to move the boat correctly. And you know what, I'm still learning. But eventually, it was like running again for me. For me, I had the basics of becoming, the best I can be, because I know what it takes mentally, I know what it takes physically, I know how hard, I have to work to make it. But first of all, feeling good about rowing, feeling that I can do it, and then just really working very hard all the time, every day, twice a day, 3 times a day, just to, get to the highest level I can. I sit in a wheelchair, so a lot of the muscles in my lower body does not work. So I need to know how to use the upper body as best as I can to just move the boat, move the oar in the water, and keep it flow, And so a lot of hard work, like all athletes do, For me to represent Israel was a dream come true. London was wonderful. It was overwhelming. It's so hard to explain the experience, how it feels to represent your country in the most, amazing and big sport event in the world. I always say that if you have met me when I was 18 and you've looked inside my chest, you wouldn't find the anatomical heart you usually find. It was round, orange, bouncing. So for me, keep playing basketball is giving me opportunity to have fun, to challenge the body in different ways than rowing. So for me, it's balancing my mental ability by doing both. I think that when you are doing sport, you eliminate all this ability you might have. You know, you just take your body to the highest level, you know, enjoy what your body can give you.
So, Merav, I mean, first of all, lucky you to get to sit with this woman, apropos heart being basketball. I mean, she's, you know, this is a heart made of steel. Well, I don't want to say steel, but this is a strong athlete.
It absolutely is. And you could tell that just from talking with her in the first 5 minutes. We were just talking about it. I couldn't even get myself to write a script and put it over her because you heard it in her voice, how much this matters to her in sports and getting back out there and doing this, because she said she's an athlete her entire life. Right. She played professional basketball here in Israel. And it really is what pushed her forward. And you hear this a lot with people who have accidents, have injuries, that sports is what brought them back to life and that got them moving again.
And also making the switch from basketball and then qualifying in para rowing, which is just to stay, I think, you know, I'm theorizing here about her decision, just to stay within the field, just to stay within, to stay an athlete.
Absolutely.
And she's qualified now for what?
So she's also looking to go back. She was in London in 2012, and she's looking to get back to Rio in 2016. So she was telling us that over the past, I think, a year or two, and her coach has changed, and that she sees herself improving just with this new coach. And she won the silver in the World Championship, so she thinks she's getting even better every day. So she's hoping to get to Rio and win that gold at Rio with this new coach that's bringing
Speaking of Israeli Paralympian athletes, how are they doing in you know, in international competitions?
I don't know exactly how the rest of them are doing. I know I spoke to her specifically. We spent the day about rowing, but that's something that she was talking about all the different rowers there, also the Israelis and the non-Israelis, and
I was going to say rowing, whether you know you're physically, you know, in your full capacity or not, it's a terribly hard sport. It's also something that, in my mind, and again, because you're the sports person, I'm not, it's something very, how should I put this? It's kind of a Harvard/British sport. You know, it's...
Absolutely, it is.
Yeah.
It's a...
Not a Middle Eastern
I think about
one.
I think about it as like an elite British and American sport.
Exactly.
The Cambridge and the Oxfords.
Bingo.
And it has actually, so we spent the day there. We also spent it with two male rowers, Danny Friedman and Oleg Gonorovsky, and they're trying to make it also to Rio in 2016. So, but we also spoke to one of the guys who works at the Daniel Center, and he was telling us about rowing in Israel and how he's been around for decades, but nobody really did it. But it's only in the past couple of years that it's gotten more and more popular. So from what they told me, there are 3 different rowing centers here in Tel Aviv. They're smaller. There's one up in the port of Haifa. That they're slowly actually starting to see more and more rowing here in Israel. They have 200 people. They said in the past couple of years, it's almost doubled how many people come and row there.
As they should, because again, in my uneducated opinion, there's so much water around us.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, I mean, we should row.
That's one of the things that when I spoke to Danny and Oleg, that they were saying, you know, the conditions here aren't optimal for rowing. Exactly for that reason. There's no water. That's very limited where you can do it. It's the Elkon here, the Jaffa Port, and the Tiberias.
Right.
So it's very, very limited, which is why it's amazing that these rowers can do this and that people are getting into this, and they are starting to take out. So there's singles, there's doubles, there's quads, and there's
and that she's, for example, in her case, that she's qualifying so high and is having such amazing results.
The case also with Danny Friedman in the past couple of years. He ranked 6th in Europe. He came in 6th in Europe and 9th overall in the world. And I got a chance to talk to him about that, and he said it was absolutely amazing. The first Israeli to do that. And it's something really special. And they told me people appreciate the fact that they do this, that they come from a country. It's not England. It's not the U.S. It's not Canada, where you do this all the time. Where high schoolers are rowing and starting their careers there. These are people who were pulled. Oleg was telling me that his coach, some guy came up to him and asked him, "What's your height and do you play basketball?" and pulled him to row. And that's how they discover the sport. It's not by doing it through school. It's by people seeing
fraternities.
And a lot of or
fraternities. I'm just saying. You know, I'm thinking immediately social network. You know, and the 2 twins. Yes, my deep education about sports, but fascinating stuff, Merav. And you know, it'll be interesting to see how she does. But it's looking good, I would say.
Yeah, it is, and especially since she was telling me that she's very optimistic about this new coach and looking ahead. And the guys are also very optimistic. They have their qualifiers in August, the World Championship. championship.
No, and not only that, as I said, it's like an
Rio.
optimistic story this morning that, of course, it's the first day of the year, but we have been covering all the, I'd say, the death and destruction of last year. And so, you uplifted our spirits, and to bring them down again, I'm going to turn to Shai Ringel.
Good morning.
Putting you on the spot there.
Yeah.
Shai Ringel of the Tube magazine,
Yeah.
right? Come on, plug your show.
The Tube magazine.
What hour?
10.
Yes.
Yeah.
Every day.
Every day.
Right, on I-24 News.
Yeah.
But you have the story that I have to say, you know what, I'm glad that I have witnesses here. It's the Sony hack, right?
Yeah, I want to send my apologies to North Korea.
Thank you.
It's
Ding,
not
ding,
your
ding,
fault.
ding, ding.
The FBI was investigating the Sony hack, the big Sony hack, and together with a security firm, they introduced the latest conclusion that it's not North Korea, it's an inside job. They have 6 suspicions of the hack.
Inside job meaning
The one disgruntled employee. They call her in the report Lana.
Her.
She has the
Lana?
the IT knowledge how to do it, but she used USB sticks to get the information out.
Oh my
and
God,
to
she's
sell
the
it.
Snowden of Sony.
Yeah.
Okay. So.
Because when you see the documents that she stole, they are really stupid. Like there's a list of, it's called passwords.
Right.
It's an Excel document, and it has passwords of everyone in the company, social security numbers, credit card numbers.
I'm glad there's, Merav, I'm glad you're also here. Can I just say that we spent 2 weeks, all of us, blaming North Korea. The United States president stood on a stage and practically blamed North Korea. And I think one can even, theorize and say that the internet, was down in North Korea as some sort of a retribution.
Yeah, maybe.
Right? And it's Lana.
Yeah.
From the 3rd floor next to the mailroom.
The Guardians of Peace, the group that sent the emails to Sony, probably came from Russia and not from North Korea. They still don't know what's the, they still don't know if it's Russian that paid the Sony employee and others to take that information. We still don't have information about that, but we now know it's probably the inside job.
It sounds like an inside job. When you say the Russians, to me, the conspiracy theorist in my head is basically saying just because this morning we had news that Russia is looking at, moving towards Iran because of the sanctions against it, then maybe the United States is now looking to blame Russia. I will shut up. This all sounds like a conspiracy. But okay, an inside job.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice.
That's it.
Nice, okay.
And the interview still sucks.
You see, I liked it.
Oh,
we had this
wow,
conversation
you liked
yesterday.
it.
Debate.
No. Yes, she liked the interview, honey.
Yeah. Wow. What can I say?
It depends if you like that type of humor. If
I
you
like that type of humor.
Then I don't know
It's not a very good movie.
I think Lana didn't like the movie.
Yeah.
I think Lana may have really disliked the movie in many ways. But moving on, Shai, what else do we have for us? Getting rid of the Internet Explorer.
Yeah, let's
Thank
talk
God.
Microsoft. Internet Explorer is going down. Microsoft will probably introduce a new browser in Windows 10, codename Spartan for now.
Spartan?
Yeah, but it's codename. They'll change it. Windows 10 is also not a very good name if we're talking about it. Microsoft are not very good at names, but it's time for them to introduce a new browser. Even though when you think about it, Internet Explorer still has 60% of the market of browsers.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
But
I have no idea what that means.
In 2000, they had 90%. It means that 60% of the people who surf the internet with PCs do it with Internet Explorer.
With Internet Explorer.
Yeah.
And finally, Portugal.
Yeah. Let's go to Portugal. A very interesting experiment where in Porto they're trying to put
And actually, we have a clip for it, my lord. We do?
For Portugal?
For Portugal, supposedly. Let's take a quick look.
I think the network is more valuable when it is everywhere. Just like we expect electricity to be everywhere, we should expect network connection to be everywhere.
Veniam recognizes that the internet is evolving to an immense ecosystem that connects millions of people and very soon,
billions of things. Most of these things will be constantly moving.
Venium is building the networking fabric for the Internet of Moving Things. Our hardware, software, and cloud components allow vehicles and other moving things to connect to each other and share data with the Internet.
This is what we call ubiquitous information, ubiquitous communication. So everything will be connected, everything will be communicating with everything. So this is our vision.
Wi-Fi on buses, that's great, because really we're not on our cell phones enough.
Yeah, but it's not, the Wi-Fi buses will give hotspots and internet for everyone in the city, which means that when you get into the city, because the hotspots are traveling, there will be internet everywhere. And they're trying it now in Porto, and it's working. And it's a very nice experiment. And the company that is doing it, it's a US company. They are now negotiating with other cities to do exactly that and try to bring free internet to the entire city by just buses and...
Amen to that.
Yeah.
Merav, how was your New Year's?
It was good.
Yeah?
Yeah, except for the drilling under my apartment at 7 this morning. I enjoyed it.
And you liked the interview. Shai?
And I liked the...
Your New Year's?
Didn't do anything, which is the best.
And you didn't like it.
I liked it. Folks, don't forget to join us tomorrow, I-24 News Morning Edition, where Shai Ringel might be here, also still not doing anything. Of course, check us out on Facebook, Twitter, all those social networks. And tomorrow morning, check us out as well, I-24 News Morning Edition, the way to start your morning every single day in 2015. Thank you.